Greetings, learners. Here we go. We're talking about Cesar Chavez. And so I'm going to be highlighting things, and I'm going to be noticing certain things. First two things I'm highlighting and noticing are the name of this speech. I know it's a speech and not something he wrote because an address is another name for a speech. And this would be the location that he gave it, the Commonwealth Club, and it was delivered in 1984. And you can listen to audio of this speech. It's out there. I bet if you did a Google search for Cesar Chavez, November 9th, 1984. Okay, all right. So let's find out. Now, what we're going to be working on here is understanding. Understand. So I'm going to be defining a lot of words. I'm not going to be really doing like a rhetorical analysis because you have to understand first, then you can really do an analysis. And that will be your job. So let's start at the top. Thank you very much, Mr. Lee, Mrs. Black, ladies and gentlemen. 21 years ago, this last September, on a lonely stretch of railroad track paralleling U.S. Highway 101 near Salinas, 32 Bracero farm workers lost their lives in a tragic accident. So, there's his opening. He's going to start with talking about people losing their lives. A bracero, farm worker, is like a laborer. That comes from the Spanish word for arm, someone who works with their arms. So these are farm workers, and they lost their lives in a tragic accident. The braceros had been imported from Mexico to work on California farms. Okay, so they're talking about migrant labor, imported labor, labor coming from a different country. That word, I'm just going to add the word labor right here. Labor. Work. They died when their bus, which was converted from a flatbed truck, drove in front of a freight train. Conversion of the bus had not been approved by any government agency. The driver had tunnel vision. Most of the bodies laid unidentified for days. No one, including the grower who employed the workers, even knew their names. The grower who employed the workers is important because if they're labor, that means they have to have a boss. So this person is their boss. But the way it works with these types of workers who were imported from Mexico is the boss didn't even know their names. Today, thousands of farm workers live under savage conditions, beneath trees and amid garbage and human excrement. If you've never heard the word excrement before, that is, we could call it, let's just call it what it is. Excrement means poop. In San Diego County. San Diego County is in California. Tomato fields, which use the most excrement near tomato fields in San Diego County. Tomato fields which use the most modern farm technology. So that's important to note. He's saying that the workers live near human excrement and garbage, but the farms itself use the most modern technology. Remember at this point that he is talking about the world of 1984, not 2017. So the world might be very different for many of those workers today. They walk miles to buy food at inflated prices, and they carry in water from irrigation ditches. That's water for crops. And a ditch is dirt. There's a ditch. Child labor is still common in many farm areas. As much as 30% of Northern California's garlic harvesters are underaged children. Kids as young as 6 years old have voted in states conducted union elections since they qualified as workers. So some of the laborers, some of these braceros who are doing work might be as young as 6 years old. Again, this is in 1984. Some 800,000 underage children work with their families harvesting crops across America. Babies born to migrant workers suffer 25% higher infant mortality. Mortality means die. Rates than the rest of the population. Malnutrition. Nutrition, you can tell, or you know, basically means food that you need to survive. Malnutrition uses a Latin root that's very common in a lot of English words, and it's also part of Spanish. It is mal, or mal, which means bad. Anytime you see the word mal as in front of a word, it's called a prefix, and mal is frequently used in English. It comes from Latin. Malnutrition among migrant workers' children is 10 times higher than the national rate. Farm workers' average life expectancy is still 49 years compared to 73 years for the average American. All my life, I have been driven by one dream, one goal, one vision, to overthrow. Overthrow means defeat or beat or conquer. A farm labor system. Farm labor system in this nation that treats farm workers as if they were not important human beings. So a farm labor system is kind of a complicated idea because a farm labor system would include all the food that's grown. So these are the food that's actually produced, the land on which the food is produced, and then who owns the land. Who owns that land? And then it would also include who works the land. And also because we're talking about something that's like a business, right? You own a farm so you can sell. Who makes the money? And all of this in the United States would involve hundreds of thousands of people because you also have in there things like transportation. And the key right there is this word system. So when you see like a word like system, it implies like something big with a lot of different pieces and a lot of different parts. So this is hundreds of thousands of people are involved in that system. Farm workers are not agricultural implements. An implement is a tool, like a tractor. They are not beasts of burden. Beasts of burden to be used and discarded. Beasts of burden are things like mules, donkeys. That dream was born in my youth. So what dream is he talking about? This dream. To destroy this system, to conquer it, to beat it, to defeat it. That dream was born in my youth. It was nurtured. So nurture is like helped to grow. In my early days of organizing, it has flourished. That means that it has grown. It has been attacked. So that's the opposite of flourishing. So it's growing, but it also has been attacked. And I guess he's probably going to tell us how and when it was attacked. It is not very different than anyone else who has ever tried to accomplish something with his life. My motivation comes from my personal life, from watching what my mother and father went through when I was growing up, from what we experienced as migrant workers in California. So how does he know about this? He lived it. His family grew up as migrant workers. That dream, that vision grew from my own experience with racism, with hope, with a desire to be treated fairly, and to see my people And who are his people? His people are those farm workers, treated as human beings and not as chattel. Chattel is a word that I didn't encounter until college, and it means slaves. It grew from anger and rage, emotions I felt 40 years ago when people of my color were denied. To deny something means like not allowed. The right to see a movie or eat at a restaurant in many parts of California. I'm going to highlight that because it just seems really important that he's actually talking about a time in American history when he, because he was Latino, because he was a Mexican American, he could not do certain things. It grew from the frustration and humiliation. Humiliation is a powerful word. It's basically making someone feel that they're less worthy. Something like that, humiliation. I felt as a boy who couldn't understand how the growers, those again are the owners, the growers could abuse and exploit. Exploit is a good word that you should learn. Exploit means, basically it means just to take advantage of. Farm workers when there were so many of us and so few of them. Later, in the 50s, I experienced a different kind of exploitation. So these are the same word. To exploit is a verb and exploitation is a noun. I experienced a different kind of exploitation in San Jose, in Los Angeles, and in other urban communities. Urban means like city. Urban communities, we, the Mexican American people, were dominated. Dominated means, dominance. If you dominate someone, that means that you are up here and they are down here. You look down on them. Try to control them. Dominated by a majority that was Anglo. Anglo is a word that a lot of times means like English, or like, in this case, he probably means like English speaking or white. I began to realize what other minority people had discovered, that the only answer, the only hope was in organizing. More of us had to become citizens. So this is an important point. More of us had to become citizens. Because if we go back to the early part of his writing, he doesn't say so explicitly, but most people know that if you're talking about imported farm labor from Mexico, what you are talking about is undocumented immigrants. Or what's also some called migrant workers. The United States has a whole system of laws that determine who can enter the country and work, but many times the labor that was imported by the growers, so the growers know that they are breaking the law in hiring workers who are coming across the border from Mexico without the proper permission to do so. They know that those people are undocumented immigrants and don't have a legal right to work in the country, but they get to pay them way less for that reason. So, and it's, so that's what he's talking about, that more of us had to become citizens. We had to register to vote, and people like me had to develop the skills it would take to organize, to educate, and to help empower the Chicano people. Chicano people is another word that means Mexican American, or like of Mexican origin. I spent many years before we founded. Founded means like started. The union. Okay, so now he's talking about a union. You might not know what a union is, so I'm going to come over here with union, because a union is a specific type of organization. And it's an organization designed, a lot of people are in unions. Firemen, police are in a union. Teachers in a lot of states, and here in Arkansas, are in unions. So unions are designed to basically protect and support workers. Unions do things like they might negotiate with the boss for a raise, and if the boss won't give them a raise, the union is organized in such a way that they could say, okay, everybody walk off the job on Tuesday, because they're not going to agree to the more money that we think we are worth. So when you think of the word union, you can think of the word strike. That's going on strike. We're going to go on strike and leave our jobs. And you can think of the word negotiate, because that's what unions do. They let everybody who works for an organization negotiate as one. So he's talking about starting a union that was for some undocumented workers who were working in the United States. I spent many years before we founded the union learning how to work with people. We experienced some success in voter registration, in politics, in battling racial discrimination. Successes in an era where Black Americans were just beginning to assert. Their assert is when you announce and almost like demand. Announce, demand. Successes in an era. An era is another word that means time. Where Black Americans were just beginning to assert their civil rights, and when political awareness among Hispanics, so another word, we've heard Chicano, we've heard Hispanic, we've heard Mexican American, all those terms are really interchangeable. Hispanics was almost non-existent, but deep in my heart, I knew I could never be happy unless I tried organizing the farm workers. I didn't know if I would succeed, but I had to try. All Hispanics, urban and rural, young and old, are connected to the farm workers' experience. We had all lived through the fields, or our parents had. We shared that common humiliation. He's talking here about the kind of work that the workers did, that the farm workers did, as humiliation. How could we progress? Progress means basically like progress, move forward. How could we progress as a people even if we lived in the cities while the farm workers, men and women of our color, were condemned? Condemned is like, if you're condemned, that means it has to do with punishment. Punished means like, condemned means you're actually like, you are sentenced by a judge to die. So he's using this word condemned here kind of like as a just a sort of a metaphor. The people weren't actually condemned, but it's a very strong word, condemned. Condemned to a life without pride. How could we progress as a people while the farm workers who symbolized our history in this land were denied self-respect? How does a worker symbolize a history of a whole people? That's the power of symbols. So that Cesar Chavez can say things like, even though I don't work in the field, those people working in the field are me. We share this history. That's the power of a symbol. And you will find, as you read these, that powerful writing always uses symbols. How could our people believe that their children could become lawyers and doctors and judges and business people while this shame, this injustice? So the shame and the injustice he's talking about, again, is the experiences, the treatment of those migrant workers. Those who attack our union often say it's not really a union, it's something else, a social movement, a civil rights movement, it's something dangerous. This is an idea you'll want to examine. Is this a dangerous idea? They're half right. The United Farm Workers, that's the name of his union, is first and foremost a union like any other, a union that either produces for its members on the bread and butter issues or doesn't survive. But the UFW has always been something more than a union, although it's never been dangerous if you believe in the Bill of Rights. Boy, those Bill of Rights, that's pretty important. Believe in the Bill of Rights. The UFW was in the beginning. We attacked that historical source of shame and infamy that our people in this country lived with. We attacked that injustice, not by complaining, not by seeking handouts, but by becoming soldiers in the war on poverty. Another metaphor. Soldiers in the war on poverty. We organized. Farm workers acknowledged we had allowed ourselves to become victims in a democratic society, a society where majority rules and collective bargaining are supposed to be more than academic theories. Collective bargaining is people work together to get what they want. Are supposed to be more than academic theories. An academic theory is like an idea that doesn't do anything. So, academic theory is just like, well, we have this idea that there's something called collective bargaining, and this is how it would operate, but it doesn't actually operate. It's just a theory. And political rhetoric. Here's that word, rhetoric. And by addressing this historical problem, we created confidence and pride and hope in an entire people's ability to create the future. The UFW survival, its existence, were not in doubt in my mind when the time began to come. And I think that's as far as I'm going to go with this. And there's many more words here, and they're all very powerful. That is Cesar Chavez and his struggle.